The city of Eugene, Oregon has passed comprehensive housing regulations without consulting the landlords who will be providing it. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting story for you today, and it's going over new housing regulations up in Eugene, Oregon. Now, I've covered the state of Oregon before. Obviously, Portland is one of the most anti-landlord places in the entire country, but the state of Oregon isn't known as being friendly to landlords anywhere within the limits of the state. So the city of Eugene actually has passed these new, regulations, and they're not very strict regulations yet. However, any regulation, any additional thing that you make landlord do will basically make it harder and harder for landlords to be able to provide the business without raising costs, and that will lead to less affordable housing. A lot of landlords don't want to jump through the hoops. A lot of landlords don't even know all the rules and regulations they have to jump through because these cities, states, municipalities keep changing them so frequently. And they're like, oh, we're going to go after these bad landlords. This will prevent the bad landlords from doing what they do, right? The problem is that, like I've said many times before, 99% of landlords are good. They do everything according to law. They keep their properties in good shape. They communicate with their tenants. They don't do anything that is against the law or against the rules. But they get caught up in this dragnet of recently changed laws or laws that, aren't fair to landlords. And then, what does that do? That forces them out of business, or that forces them to lose thousands and thousands of dollars. And I just don't like seeing that sort of thing. So it's absolute mess, right? And one of those things that they are doing is they are limiting the amount of rental fees that they can charge for applicants, right? And like I've said before, I've done videos on other places where, they've limited the amount of fees you can charge to applicants. And my big gripe with that is that, hey, background investigations, when I do a background investigation on a tenant, it's not free. Okay, I don't get it for free. I don't get it for $5 or $10 or whatever they think is fair. Okay, it costs me like $30 to $40 every time I do a background on a tenant. And you're telling me I can only charge like $10? I mean, that's an instant loss for me. That's not fair. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tack that onto the rent. Every additional cost that I have to pay that you won't, it's going to be why the rents are so high. And that's what other landlords do as well. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, and leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think, okay? Now, speaking of Oregon, right? Do you consider it to be the worst landlord, anti-landlord state, at least on the West Coast? It's a hard battle between, California, Oregon, and Washington State. It's which one is the worst state in your opinion? And within those states, what are the worst cities? You think it's, like Seattle, Portland? Is it Los Angeles? Is it, San Francisco? Who knows? But which city is the worst on the West Coast? I mean, it seems like the West Coast is just full of places where they just don't believe that landlords have any property rights, and that they think that all landlords are these super rich, evil people, and they won't let us just run our businesses. Come on, let us do what we're trying to do, and maybe there won't be so many problems. Anyway, this article is coming from registerguard.com, and it says, FAQ, what renters, landlords need to know about Eugene's newly passed renter protections. Yeah, every time I read an article and it's talking about new, renter protections or, new laws to punish landlords, it scares the living mess out of me, because I know that, one, they probably didn't actually consult landlords, okay? Two, they passed the law thinking that all tenants are good people and would never do anything wrong, right? And three, they passed the laws, without any sort of knowledge about how businesses operate, what business expenses are, and that, it's probably not going to be workable in a lot of situations. So let's get into this article and see what it says. Eugene officials have passed its first phase of renter protections that include a housing navigator and a cap on screening fees. After months of discussion, the city council voted 62 to enact 5 protections that one councilor described as having minimal impact on landlords. The code changes will go into effect 31 days after the mayor signs the ordinance passed Monday night, which a spokesperson said should happen within the next couple of days. So yeah, they're saying that, hey, these new laws, these new regulations within the city are going to have a minimal impact on landlords. Well, let's see if that is the case, okay? I'm going to skip down in the article to the point where they actually start talking about what these new rules and regulations are, because a lot of this is fluff stuff, talking about these hard luck stories some tenant has. I don't care, okay? Listen, let's get to the meat, okay? What protections will become part of the rental housing code? The code changes will go into effect 31 days after the mayor signs the ordinance, which a spokesperson said should happen Tuesday or Wednesday. The 5 protections that passed Monday night are: 1. Support services. The city will create and fund a rental housing navigator position. The person in that role will help expand and manage data collection on rentals, enforce protections, and provide other support services, which could include a tenant hotline, risk mitigation funding, and eviction diversion. Support services will be for both tenants and landlords. Genevieve Middleton, the city's grants manager for community development, said the city plans to increase the rental housing code door fee from $10 to $20 for the first year the protections are in place to fund the services and the new position. That will generate around $360,000, she said. So yeah, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to increase fees, make landlords pay a whole bunch of fees, and guess what? Those fees are going to get tacked on to the rent. That's right. So less affordable housing available, right? And they're going to create an eviction diversion program. Basically, they're going to come in here and say, oh, well, we want to stop this eviction, so we're going to try to, slow the process down, make it worse, make it harder for landlords to evict tenants. That's what an eviction diversion program does, right? And you're creating more bureaucracy. And I hate seeing, when the government tries to create more, we're going to create this new position who's going to enforce these new regulations, right? So now you got some bureaucrat coming after landlords, small mom and pop landlords getting caught up in this ridiculous bureaucracy. And so, yeah, the first thing, I already hate it. Let's get into the second one. 2, move in and move out documentation. This code change requires landlords to itemize and photo document the property condition at move in and move out. It also requires landlords to itemize and photo document withholdings from security deposits. Assistant City Attorney Lauren Summers said the code changes don't preclude landlords from documenting issues that a photo can't capture, such as odors, in other ways. It just means they have to provide at least a photo to document the issue, she said. Counselor Alan Zelenka said while some landlords have argued the new requirement will be burdensome, he was able to take a video of everything in every room of his house in less than 2 minutes. Hey, I already was doing this, okay? I go through every single place in my house and I'm taking pictures of everything. Why? Because if I have to go down to the judge and show them all the damages and something that that my tenant did, I need evidence of it. So, you know what? This is just good business practice. They don't need a law, though, saying it. If the landlord doesn't want to do it, they're the only ones who are going to be suffering. Now, in terms of, the security deposit and all that, right? You do need to itemize that stuff. But you can't, a tenant can't come in there and be like, hey, I didn't cause this damage here. And like they said, how are you supposed to take a picture of smell? The house stinks of cigarette smoke and I had to replace all the carpets. Well, you can't take a picture of smell. I can take a picture of the carpet. Carpet looks good, smells like an ashtray, but it looks good. How are you supposed to document that? Okay, so I don't like when they create laws that aren't needed, that aren't necessary. So they create this regulation for landlords, right? And it's not necessary because most landlords were already doing this, okay? Number 3, rental history. The code changes also require landlords who receive a written request from a tenant to provide rental history up to 2 times per year, even if the tenant hasn't yet given notice that they plan to move out. A memo from staff specifies that landlords could voluntarily provide a reference more than 2 times, but won't be required to do so. So yeah, number 3 is they want landlords to provide a rental history to tenants, right? Well, I want to make sure that my tenant actually completed the terms of their lease without paying me late, without missing any payments, without doing any damage before I provide a rental history to some other landlord. So I'm putting another landlord in a bad position if I'm up here saying, oh yeah, they did great. They did great for those 3 months or whatever. And then for the next 3 months after that, they didn't pay me any rent. And when I went in there to, look at the unit afterwards, they tore the place apart. That's not going to do any good to the next landlord. So you know what, they don't consider that sort of thing. Like, hey, the next person renting to this person might want to have a complete picture of this tenant's history and not just a brief snapshot. Number 4, tenant educational information. The city will create, update, and post educational material on the rights and obligations of landlords and tenants during eviction or other actions to end a tenancy. It will include at least the rental housing code and tenant protections. Once that's created, landlords must distribute the document along with rental agreements. And this is another thing that I don't like. I don't like them saying, hey, landlords got to pass out all these forms and papers and crap from the city. No, if these people want the tenants to have it, they should pass it out, okay? They created a new bureaucratic position just to make sure these regulations are upheld. So why aren't they passing this crap out on their own, I mean, I think that the landlord, their focus is the business. It isn't on, making sure that the tenant, knows that they can sue the landlord. That's stupid, okay? This should be another thing that landlords are, especially the small ones who own like one property, they're not going to know about this, and they're going to get caught up in some kind of mess. And it's not like their property's in bad shape or they're treating their tenant wrong, but they forgot their little document, and then they're probably going to get fined or cited or screwed over in some way. And finally, number 5 is a cap on applicant screening fees. Eugene now limits the total fees per applicant to $10. The code defines these fees, often referred to as application fees or screening fees, as any payment of money required by a landlord of an applicant prior to entering into a rental agreement with that applicant for rental housing, the purpose of which is to pay the cost of processing an application for a rental agreement for rental housing. Councilor Randy Groves offered an amendment changing the maximum from $10 to $25 in an effort to strike a balance. The council voted the proposed amendment down on a 3-5 amendment. So it says Councilor Matt Keating, who voted against the amendment, said when he and his partner most recently applied for a place to live, they paid somewhere between $500 and $1,000 in application and screening fees. That's the cost of doing business, okay? If you have to pay all those application fees in order to find a place, then that's the cost of doing business, okay? When you go down and you're buying a house, you have to pay, like I had to pay so many different closing costs. I had to prepay my insurance for a year. I had to pay my property taxes. I had to pay, the title insurance. I had to pay, just everything, and it ended up being thousands of dollars. That's the cost of doing business. If I didn't have the money in order to do that, then I wouldn't be able to live in the house that I'm living in right now. Okay? And it's the same with these application fees. It is the cost of doing business. And a landlord should have the right to charge you the cost in order to do the background investigation, in order to pay their employees to lease the place up to you. I mean, this stuff isn't free. I don't know what idea they're getting, but this stuff is not free. Okay? So, yeah, it might suck, but guess what? We need that money. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to get the best tenant in there. And you know what we're going to end up doing? we're going to say, hey, we're not going to charge you this fee, but you have to go off on your own, get the background investigation and bring it to us, or something like that. I know I've heard of many cases like that, okay, where they're saying, hey, you now, because we can't charge you these fees, we're going to force you to go jump through the hoops. You go get your own credit report. I mean, you should be able to get it for free online, but if you can't, you might have to pay for it. You go get your own, criminal history done and bring it to me. And if you don't bring me the criminal history, then, you can't even apply, and so that way you still have to pay all those fees, but it still kind of is a workaround around the law. So yeah, I don't like all this stuff that they're doing. They start off with this stuff here, right? And they say, oh, it won't be too burdensome on landlords. Well, guess what? Eventually, they're going to start passing laws that are burdensome upon landlords. And when they do, right, they'll be able to justify it because, oh, there were no complaints about these other regulations. Well, every single one of these other regulations is a burden, and it will end up costing landlords money. And that will be passed on to tenants, leading to less affordable housing. And that's what they seem to always be worried about.